Welcome to the No Name Podcast. It's 2023. Happy New Year.
Yeah.
Hopefully you guys had a good holiday break. Definitely good to be back and kind of recording these things. Appreciate the comments out there and the things going on. Again, we want you guys to keep building this community. So again, hit the like and subscribe button. Keep passing it along and be engaged. Ask questions. And, we finished up the book of Romans. We have a couple other things. We talked about Jesus' birth as we're getting into Christmas. And so we're definitely excited for this year, see what it brings. We're going to have different topics and different books we're going through. And, sometimes we're going to be right. Sometimes we're going to be wrong. And sometimes we're just going to be in the middle. So, again, just be part of it, be engaged, and, again, join the community. Before we jump in, any resolutions or anything for the new year?
I had to say that we should change our habits. That would be about it. Nothing more than that, right?
Don't change them. Just make it another day and another year. That's what I'm grateful for.
No resolutions. That ain't gonna work.
No, I really have never made resolutions, and I've think throughout the years too, I've learned that.
Resolutions don't work. Come on, man.
Yeah.
Be honest.
When you make a rule or a law, you're setting yourself up to fail.
Yeah.
Because sooner or later you're gonna break it.
Yeah.
You should just live it one day at a time and try your best every day to live a good life.
Yeah.
And a good Christian life.
Yeah.
It's us as Christians, but. I've never been years. I don't think I've ever made a resolution.
No resolutions.
Whatever it's called, because I know that if I do, I'm gonna break it. I'm gonna break it.
I think we were talking yesterday about gym memberships, right? How people, they get those gym memberships in January, gyms all filled up. February filled up. By March, it's back empty.
That's why they took away the contracts,
right?
The long ones.
No, they still have the contracts there.
Oh, they do.
They say it's no contract, but they make it you still difficult to get to cancel. So it's not like, and then they lower down the pricing so that it becomes something that you just don't think about. Like if it's $10, $15, $20, and you're never going, but you don't think about it because you're like, oh, it's $10, $15, whatever. I might show up.
No resolutions.
So no, but I think that's a good point. I think changing habits. I mean, you don't have to wait to the beginning of the year or anything like that. That's something that's continuously happening. I think one of the things through this podcast, as we continue to search for God and challenge each other here on this podcast, and even you guys listening on your relationship with God, is I think you'll see a transformation slowly happen and things change as you go through. And it's not all about, the bad stuff in our life changing. Sometimes it's just about the positives too. It's about just how we view things and how we look at things. So
agreed.
So hopefully you guys are getting that and taking some of that. We got a few suggestions, but we weren't sure where we were headed. So I think what we're actually going to do is go into one of the Gospels. And I think we decided on the Gospel of John, which is a very good gospel. And it's been the Gospels, which is the first 4 books of the New Testament.
Mark, Luke, John.
Yeah, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Those are the 4 Gospels and tell the story of Jesus, and then you go into Acts, and then you go into the letters of Paul and things of that sort, and some of the letters of the other disciples. But as we were preparing, I was looking into it, and it's interesting because the book of John is a little different than Mark, Luke, and Matthew. John gets more into the spiritual side, where Mark, Matthew, and Luke are more on the listing out the events and the things that happen and the things and some believe John, and it just depends where you read it. John is one of the ones written by an eyewitness because it's believed to be written by the disciple named John, but there's dispute on that. I mean, it just that's where faith comes in. You have to trust in the word's inspired by God and led by God. So sometimes we can get caught up in the semantics of it and the arguments of it instead of looking at what the message is there. Right. So again, hopefully as you guys travel this journey with us, you guys start reading the book of John and just kind of look at it. And one of the things I'll challenge you is come to it with a fresh mind. You may have read the book of John 100 times, maybe heard a lot of sermons on it. but to come and look at it with a fresh mind. And then also one of the things that I think, even like with me, one of the things that I definitely look at is, yes, you should apply it to your daily life and apply it to today, but we got to also understand that this was written in a Eastern world context. So some of the customs and stuff, some of the customs are not the same customs. So we can't always compare apples to apples. You can compare certain things apples to apples, but you also have to understand the customs and understand where this is coming from. And I think that opens our eyes to a lot of different things. But the book of John has always been one that people have referred to people when they first start off. And so again, we're going to start off with chapter 1. I honestly think we're probably going to break this into 2 podcasts just because it is there's a lot in chapter 1.
Oh, man.
So, but again, I don't know, is there anywhere you guys want to start off? I mean, I would say we start off in the beginning.
Yeah, man, definitely the beginning.
I think one of the major difference between John and when you look at Mark and Luke, they start with the chronology of Jesus' life. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the things about the gospel. And I think this is why it's so, we were talking about it when we're going through Christmas. Jesus coming into this world was a Genesis, a second Genesis. It was a new start for mankind because Paul, I think, refers to him as the second Adam. I believe in one of his letters, he refers to him as the second Adam.
Yep.
And because with Jesus now there comes this atonement, this spiritual, the Spirit of God had always been around, but the Spirit of Jesus, the Holy Spirit, is now left here when Jesus ascends. And so it's a whole different thing. Now it's a confirmation of what it should always have been, right? A relationship with God, and Jesus is that atonement and that fulfillment. And where Luke and Mark start off with the chronology of Jesus, Mark going through from Abraham all the way to Jesus, and Luke starting all the way to Adam. Matthew just jumps right into his early ministry. John decides to go in a different manner. And when you read it, it doesn't seem to make sense unless you understand the Genesis, but John puts Jesus at the very beginning, before eternity. And this is one of the things that in John that as you start looking in deeper, you see the divinity of Christ being expressed more in John than anywhere else in the other Gospels. And so you see it right out the bat, like as John is writing this. And I'll read the beginning part. It just says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men, and the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it."
Yeah.
And I mean, right here in the opening statement, you see John addressing a very big thing, that Jesus' divinity of being God's son, which Jesus won't bring up until later on. He'll make proclamations and things of that sort, and it is what he's later on crucified for. But you see John putting Jesus at the very beginning, before time, before all of it. He's right there in the midst with God at the level of God, at the divinity of God. And so that's what I find very interesting, how John opens it up.
Yeah. For me, it just like you said, man, just the beginning of it was it's just crazy, man. Like how he just immediately started talking about how the Word was God, man. And something in here that it kind of caught me though a little bit. Though. Let me see if I can find it. And it's a little bit further down. God sent a man. Okay, so you said then in 5 you said the light shines in the darkness and the dark can never extinguish it, right? So you go on to see. There was something here I was just kind of like, man, what? It was where he's talked about how Moses. What is that at? It's further down, I think.
Yeah.
Right. He's talked about how Moses was the law, but Jesus Christ was love. Let me see. Okay, there's 17.
Yeah,
for the law was given through Moses, but God's unfailing love and faithfulness came through Jesus Christ, man. That right there, that was just kind of like, man, because we had been talking about the law, in Romans. And if you look at what Paul was talking about, he was talking about exactly the same thing.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that when you read John, you have to understand, and that's why it's good to have a good comprehension of the whole Bible. It's good to have a study, and it doesn't mean to read the whole, like, it is good to read the whole Bible. I'm not saying that you should do it from cover to cover. There's different plans to do it and things like that. But it'll naturally happen if you start reading the Bible. And I think that's one of the things that you start seeing is in the Gospels, they're tying back to the Old Testament, right? Because the Old Testament was supposed to be foreshadowing of what it was. And Moses was a Christ-type figure. Right, so he was he came in. Actually, Moses is considered one of the from a Jewish standpoint or an Israelite standpoint, like this is almost like their Jesus. This is the epitome of, because he was the one that spoke with God, right? Abraham hears of God, sees God. Jacob, Isaac, they all have their thing.
But not like Moses,
but
though.
Moses spoke with God on a consistent basis and was there in the tabernacle, set the people free. So he's considered one of the pinnacles of the Israelite history, of the Hebrew history. And in Judaism, that would tie him at the very top.
So is that why he said, for the law was given through Moses?
Yeah, because Moses delivers the law, right? This is Jesus. So, and we've had this discussion when we went into Romans. The law has always been in existence, but where it started being written down was with Moses, right? Moses goes up there and God gives him the law, then more laws are added on. But that's where it all starts in regards to the law. And I think that's where John is trying to drive it at. I think John is tying in several different things. One, I think when you look at the beginning, that Jesus has always been around. And you see that as when he addresses them as the word and the light. Because if you go back to Genesis, it calls back to Genesis, right?
Right.
How did God create everything? Through his word.
His words. Right.
Like he spoke.
Through his word.
He spoke and light was created. He spoke and existence happened. He spoke. The only time he didn't speak was when he created mankind. But everything else, he spoke and it was created.
Right. Yep.
And so when you see that, and John ties this in saying, so if God's speaking and the Lord is his word and Jesus is his words, then everything was created through Jesus.
Through Jesus, right.
And for him.
Okay.
And so that's where John begins to tie in the eternity of it.
Let me see. We can keep going further, though. No one ever seen God but the unique one, who is himself God. Is near to the Father's heart. He has revealed God to us.
Well, it's interesting because then he goes into, so Jesus in the first part of this chapter is compared to the Word. Then he's compared to the light
in the beginning, right?
And it says there was a man sent from God whose name was John. And this is not John the author. This is referring to now John the Baptist. This man came from the wilderness to bear witness of the light, that all through him might believe. He was not the light, but was sent to bear witness of the light, and that was true. That was a true light which gives light to every man coming into the world. And so that's one of the things that again John is setting up here. He's bringing into the understanding that Christ is the light. Like he's bringing enlightenment to the relationship between God and humanity, right? We have the law, we have these things, the Jewish, and more so the Hebrews were living under, and then again, the Jews at that point are living under this law and this understanding that they've had for many years of the relationship between God and mankind, which I think a lot of them kind of misunderstood. And they know there's a Messiah coming. And I think that's one of the things John is kind of stating, and we'll see later on in the first chapter. They look at John the Baptist and they're saying, are you the Messiah? So this concept of a Messiah had been around. This is not a foreign concept to them. It was just a matter of when and the understanding of it. And I think that's one of the things I definitely take from here is when we read the Bible, when we look at our relationship with God, like it has to be through the understanding of Christ, because if not, then we're misled, we're misunderstood. Because though the Israelites had the understanding of it, if you see all the ones that truly had a relationship with God throughout the Old Testament, and there's others that are mentioned, but the ones that are mentioned in the Old Testament, they had this concept of one that was coming who was going to be the Messiah and who was going to lead somewhere.
Yeah.
You have anything or?
Yeah, no, I'm listening.
No, I know. I just.
Yeah, I mean, I think John was trying to establish Jesus first, because, so people could understand, what was going on. Because you see, like in the first verse, it says that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. You see, the first thing he established that, we need the Word. We need the Word in our life. We need the, that's, if we're going to have a relationship with God, we have to receive the Word. It can be by reading. It can be by, listening to messages. Whenever you listen to gospel music, God will speak to you. Or sometimes it might not even have to do with anything Christianity. God will use something that's going to catch your attention. He was trying to establish that Jesus was the Word. We needed to accept it and receive it. Because sometimes we start having doubts when Jesus speaks to us. And then he comes out with what is it? And in him was what is it? Yeah, in him was life, and the life was the light of man. You see, in other words, without Christ, we're dead, spiritually dead. We need Christ to give us life. He gives us the life that, he makes us see everything different. You see, and then from the life he gives us, when we accept him into our life and we follow him, the light comes. And look what verse 5 says, and the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it.
Right.
See?
Mine says can never extinguish it.
Right. You see, so the darkness cannot accept the light. It can't understand what it is. That's why it's very important that we have Christ in our life, because he's the light, and he will lead us. Without Christ, we're not going to understand the things that happens in our life. That's why we always tend to question things. One is human nature. Two, if you don't have a relationship with God, you're not going to understand why things happen in our life. Why God permits them in our life, and it's like life and death. Well, we talk about it, but when death comes, it affects a lot of people. Oh
yeah, definitely.
But when it talks about darkness, what do you think it's actually? I have my opinion, so I'm asking the question. But what do we think it's referring to here as the darkness?
Darkness can be a lot of things. One, sin is darkness.
Not truth. Not truth.
When you go through circumstances, the Bible says, King David even said it, though we walk through the valley of death or darkness. In some version it says darkness. We shall fear no evil because he is with us. Yeah. Sometimes our circumstances, our trials, our attacks from Satan, can be darkness. Yeah. And then sometimes we can't see the light. Yeah. We feel alone. We feel like nobody's there. Yeah. And that's where we gotta believe that the Word is there. You see, and God will light it up. Yeah, and I think that's what's interesting as John goes into this, because I think the darkness here, I do think it represents some of sin, but I think sometimes people tie it too much to sin. I think the darkness here, because again,
what's interesting, yours said could not what?
Mine said cannot extinguish it.
Could not extinguish. Mine in the New King James Version says could not did not comprehend it.
Right.
And I think
or never has not understood it either. That's what it said, yeah.
And I think so. If you keep reading down, right, and it leads into it. I think it to me the darkness here is mankind's understanding of the relationship between them and God, because that's if you look at the overall Bible, which sin distorts, right? Yeah. Sin distorts that understanding of the relationship, right? Because where the relationship with God and mankind is a relationship, right, an unconditional love. If you read through the whole Bible, that's not just a New Testament gospel thing.
No, that's the whole thing
that God's love for humanity and all of and all pieces of that. And by God, that's the Godhead, right? God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit all combined in this plan and in this relationship. And I think when you start looking at that, I think the darkness here is the comprehension of that, right? Because if you go to, as you were kind of talking about and go further, it starts talking about John the Baptist, but again, it starts referring to Jesus. And one of the things in 8, it says, he was not the light, which is referring to John the Baptist, but was sent to bear witness to the light. That was the true light, which gives light to every man coming into this world. And to me, as I read that, is here's Jesus, because when Jesus comes in, again, we're talking about this second Genesis, right? Jesus comes in and he's going to disrupt the understanding of the Jewish people of the relationship between them and God through the Messiah. And now Jesus is disrupting this, and he's the light. He's bringing light to it, right? So light brings several different things, and a lot of times we tie light to the sin, and the light brings an understanding to our sins. But then light, I think also it brings to the understanding of the things that sin leaves behind, and then also the other stuff. Like there's things not tied into it, kind of like you're talking about. Like death is a natural process.
Yeah.
And we don't always understand that. We think we do, but we don't comprehend. Like in our relationship with God, when we're looking through the light, death is not the end. That's just us changing addresses and going and being in the next level, being in that next place with him. Versus in mankind's eyes, if you think there is no accountability, or you think there is no secondary or afterlife, then this is your best life. You live it to the best, and
this is it.
There's
for you.
nothing.
Right.
There's nothing afterwards. So there's no regrets, no concerns, no whatever. And so you see Jesus coming in, and he's bringing a light in, right? And John is here, and this is also a fulfillment of a prophecy. But John is here bearing the light, right? He's here. You have someone who is in the wilderness and calling people to redemption. He's baptizing them, but he's not the light. He's the forerunner, and he's the forerunner for Jesus to dwell among there. And I think that's where we start seeing that. I think you see the transition in the first few few verses of Jesus was the Word. Now he's the light. And then in 14 it says, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory.
And he was full of unfailing love and faithfulness.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And that's what I find interesting, because so here we have Jesus representing the Word. So he's there with God in the beginning of creation, and all is made through him. He is now the light that's coming to the world. John's going to be announcing this. And all of a sudden you have, okay, now the Word, in other words, a portion of God becomes flesh.
It's real. Yeah.
Like he chooses to become human. And with that, yes, he still has some of his divinity, but he is also human. So now he has feelings, he has emotions, he's going to feel, he's flesh. Like there's no doubt about it. John is making it very clear. God sent his only begotten Son, who's going to be flesh, who's going to dwell among us, and we're going to see his glory, the glory of him. And I think, and then it goes on. I think John is really tying in John the Baptist here, because he's going into John bore witness of him and cried out saying, was he of whom I said, he who comes after me is preferred before me, for he was before me. And of his fullness we have received, and grace, for the law was given through Moses, but grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. And I love how John puts it, because it's grace and truth. It's not condemnation and judgment. It's grace and truth.
Yeah.
And when I read that, that's love and justice.
Yeah.
Right?
Mine's is unfailing love and faithfulness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because, I mean, if the law's perfect, the law is perfect, and when you try to live by the law, so you're gonna break it, condemnation will come in, So God had to bring grace, into our life, but you see, the thing is too that, he sets up for Jesus so people know who's the Savior, you see? And then
because people was looking at him, right?
And it comes up to John as a witness, and because I still believe we make the same mistake. Sometimes we follow a pastor more than Jesus. Sometimes we follow an evangelist more than Jesus. Sometimes we follow a gospel band more than Jesus. And we confuse or church, even the church, name of the church and all that. And that's why a lot of people, even though they think they have the light, because the last part that they cannot comprehend or understand. See, even there's Christians that cannot understand, what God is trying to do in their life. But things happen because they don't have a relationship with Him. They don't know who the Word is, and the Word is Jesus, and Jesus will deal with you, to bring change, to understand why sometimes things happen in our life, because sometimes we get that disillusion. I think as once we begin as Christians that everything's supposed to be fine as Christian. You're not gonna go through problems.
That's not true.
You're not gonna lose nobody in your
Not
life. You're not gonna go through the sicknesses and all that. And no, we're still living in an imperfect world. And we're living in an imperfect body. Things are gonna happen. And that's why God, the light, makes you understand what you're going through. It's like even
that's that's right. That's exactly right.
Death, I mean, none of us want to die, but we understand it's a good thing if we do die. We're dying physically, but our spirit is going to a better place. But the physical side, doesn't comprehend that.
Well,
I can agree.
And I think that's what we're seeing. So I think when you're looking at the first part of John, you're seeing the comprehension of the putting together, and that's why John is so interesting, because he goes all the way to the beginning of time and he confirms Jesus' divinity, confirms he's there with God, and now he's the light. And I think John is trying to point that Jesus is here to bring enlightenment, and that's one of the things you're going to see is like Jesus came and disrupted the Jewish customs, and he disrupted humanity, but not in the way that they were thinking. Right? They're thinking of a Messiah coming, like who's going to come and free them, and a warrior, and he's going to be this and that. And now, but Jesus is coming, and he's disrupting it in another way, which is enlightening people on what the true relationship and the freedom is with God. And in order for him to do that, he has to become flesh.
Right.
God has to bring him to become flesh, because like you said, the law is perfect.
Will never be perfect.
And Romans, when we touched on Romans, so if you haven't heard those podcasts, I recommend go back. Paul talks about how the law is perfect, but sin corrupted sin used the law to corrupt us and put us into confusion, so the piece here that I think is really interesting about this, because Paul is a good example of it, is there was many who thought they were enlightened because they understood the law of Moses. They understood a lot of it, but they didn't see it through the eyes of Christ. And that's why I really think when you touch into Paul's life and touch into this, you see there's an enlightenment. Like Paul has to be blinded so that he can see again. Like there's an enlightenment because it's not that he learned bad stuff. It's just now he's seeing it through the eyes of Christ. Like he's seen how the law was always meant to be and how it was supposed to be fulfilled. Because Paul in the beginning doesn't think Jesus is the Messiah, because he has a concept of what the Messiah should be.
Right.
And that's why I think, and when we come back on our next podcast, as we touch into still in chapter 1, we're going to touch into John the Baptist. This is why I believe they thought John the Baptist was the Messiah. Because
they were asking,
because he was disrupting in a way they expected the Messiah to be disrupted. And Jesus' ministry is totally different, because Jesus doesn't really start making waves, not even with the Roman citizens and stuff, until later on. Like he makes little waves, but a lot of it's at the synagogues and things like that. But it's not until later on that Jesus, because Jesus wasn't here to fight against the Romans. John the Baptist makes major waves in his proclamations. And so thanks for joining us for the first episode of 2023. Hit the like and subscribe button. And again, this is the first part of John chapter 1, and then we'll do John chapter 1 second part here, and we'll have it out to you guys in a week. Again, ask questions, keep pushing, and thanks.